Hey, everybody, we are back with another Monday night tip for you. And this goes out in response to our member here, Glenn Morimoto's question being, why is it so difficult to play in an ensemble? You know, we're fighting intonation, tempo, volume, etc. He said, especially even with his own section mates at times. And practicing at home doesn't really prepare you for performance necessarily, and the different ebb and flow of playing with other musicians. So let's talk a little bit about this. So there's a few things that come to mind here. Focus is one of them. Um, Communicating with your peers is really important. And I think being flexible is another one. So let's break this down a little bit, Paul.
So the first topic, focus, we'll discuss right now. There's a few different points to make here. Focus in practice so that you're internalizing how it feels to play down the center of the horn in tune, practice with a metronome and all that, so that it's within your body. And then when you've created that focus, you take that to the performance or your rehearsal situation. And if you can always draw on that focus, those lessons learned, you'll be able to carry that into those other situations.
Yeah, so just a brief example of what Paul's talking about. Let's just say you're practicing a big band chart, for instance, in your room, your practice room, wherever that might be, with your tuner on, and maybe at the exact volumes you think you'd be playing it, maybe even at different volumes. You might want to play it overall on the quiet side, overall right where you normally play it, and then overall maybe a little louder than normal. And so you start to do a little bit of what we call body mapping and understand what's going on in your body, and to a certain degree learn to play not only by what you hear, which is very important, but also by feel. It's a combination of these two things that sometimes gets us out of trouble in some of these situations.
That reminds me of a story that I heard. Bobby Shue was asked, or is maybe asked a lot, how do you play with, a junior high school or a high school band and not fall into the trap of trying to chase the intonation or chase the rhythm section, for tempos and so on. And he said he's got it all internalized so well that he just knows what he's supposed to do physically and what's going to come out the horn. He just trusts that his body will carry him through.
Right. So then that being said, moving on, let's talk a little bit about communication. I think communication is really important. So Glenn, you're talking about your section mates even not agreeing on things. So I think it's clear whoever's leading the section, or it could be a collective thing as well. It doesn't have to be pointed out only by one person. The idea is that certain things are agreed on. And those things could be, again, I'll just use a big band. Let's say we're playing in a big band. So, we may want to be listening to that ride cymbal for the time. That might be that might be the most solid, musician regarding time. It could be for pitch. We're listening to piano because maybe it's a keyboard, electronic keyboard, and it's fixed pitch. Or maybe it's a, electric bass, even an acoustic bass. I mean, typically we're listening down for pitch, but the idea is that we're all agreeing on what we're listening to.
So a way you can approach the section, if you want to at least get, your section all playing together, is, you could say, hey, you're sharp and you're flat and so on, but that's not really a good way to communicate. So you could just say, hey guys, what are you listening for? What are you tuning to? And find out what it is that they are listening for. And maybe it's something that you're not, and maybe should be, or maybe you're just bringing their attention to something that maybe they should be listening to. But collectively, if you can agree on what to listen for, like Bobby said, if it's a fixed instrument like a keyboard, that's not going to move. You're going to have to move as well.
Yeah. Now, that being said, I think it's really important, even with a tuner. I mean, everybody can have tuners and pitch could still be all over the place. So it's really important to go back to this focus thing that we were talking about and focus on yourself, even though the world is crumbling around you, so you don't destroy your own playing. And, just observe things like make sure you're not playing too loud, you know, just being careful and being vigilant, so you're not destroying your chops.
Now, being flexible, we've talked about that or touched on that. So that also has to do with intonation as well. There are some orchestras in Europe that play at A438. There are some that play at A442, and you have to just agree that, well, if that's where the collective intonation is of the orchestra or the band or whatever you're playing with, you have to be flexible enough to move with that and then play in tune within that pitch center. So, Bobby, you've got a great story about when you were recording your album down in South America. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so we contracted a studio, we figured everything out. I flew everybody down there, and they asked, "Do you want to have the piano tuned?" So I said, "Of course, we need the piano tuned." So they had it all tuned, everything was set up. We took about a half a day to completely set up and started laying down the rhythm section tracks, and I was producing from the booth. Later on that day, it became apparent that we needed to lay down our horn parts. So I started putting those down with the sax player. And I just thought to myself, wow, this is really on the high side, this pitch. It just felt really weird. So I pulled out my tuner and I thought, wow, this is like really sharp. And I had my tuning slide like way in. And I asked the sax player, do you feel like we're really, on the sharp side? He says, yeah, absolutely. So after we got done doing our first couple of songs or whatever, went back to the booth to listen to everything. And I asked the manager of the studio, I said, so was the piano tuned? And he says, yeah. I said, well, what was it tuned to? And he said, it was tuned to A443. And I said, well, why would you do that? He says, well, because here in Argentina, we use the bandoneon, which is the concertina-like tango instrument. And he says, they're all fixed, and that's what they all tune to. So that's what everybody tunes to down here. So I had to fight a little bit. I had to be flexible in playing in a different manner. It felt like my horn was like a small bore trumpet. It felt kind of weird playing like that, but I did get used to it. The album turned out great, and we all survived. But it is important to be able to have a mindset of flexibility, I think.
That's a great story. It also reminds me, I was touring on the Sister Act Broadway tour, and I had to go the opposite direction. So when I first got on the tour, the musical director, the MD, came to me and he said, Paul, you're really playing sharp. And okay. Normally, I'm not accused of being terribly out of tune, but which is not to say I'm perfect by any means. But anyway, so I'll go wherever it needs to go, right? But I wasn't hearing it in the same way that he was. So I got my tuner on, and I was putting it right down the center, A440. I even checked my tuner to make sure that it was calibrated correctly so that I wasn't playing out of tune to the tuner. I still get the same notes, Paul, you're sharp. Okay. Finally, I went to the MD and I said, I'm just not hearing whatever it is that you're hearing that's offensive and sharp to your ears. So what should I listen to? And he was playing the third keyboard part, which was auxiliary horns and strings and some other effects and things from the podium where he was conducting. So he says, yeah, well, don't listen to the baritone saxophone in my left hand, because that's really, really sharp. And I said, well, that's sort of the basis of the whole horn section intonation. He goes, yeah, don't listen to that, because that'll cause you to play too sharp. Okay. And he says, oh, and don't listen to the strings in my right hand, because those are really sharp. So that's going to cause you to go even more sharp. And I go, okay, well, I won't listen for that. And then I said, the trombone player sitting right next to me, he's about 25 cents sharp all the time. And the MD said, yeah, I know. Don't listen to him. I said, but he's the bottom of the chord as well. So what do I tune to? And the MD said, well, just do your best. And so all I could figure out to do is try to listen to the bass. And I thought I was in tune to the bass. Well, the MD was still not happy. I ended up having to tune my tuning slide out about, geez, I don't know, even 2 inches or something. And I got one of those clip-on tuners, and I pinned the needle 15 cents flat all the time. It took a while to adjust my ears, and it sort of played hell on my chops for about a week or so before I just began to trust that, okay, well, that's where I got to keep it. And then the note came back, Paul, you're in tune. Thank you. That's great.
So, Glenn Morimoto, there's a little bit there on our approach to this, how we approach these situations, and just remember to remain focused, communicate with your peers, and be as flexible as you can. And we hope this makes your next musical experience a little more enjoyable.